President-elect Bola Tinubu's call on Tuesday for national healing to start in the wake of the general election has been drawing diverse reactions from politicians and regular Nigerians alike. Mr. Tinubu had in a statement he personally signed expressed sadness about the reported infractions during the elections and its aftermath in some states. He appealed to all Nigerians to rise above individual differences, which in his words are fewer than the valued strings that bind the nation together as a people, irrespective of the circumstances of birth. Phrank Shuaibu is spokesman, People's Democratic Party's Presidential Campaign Council. He joins us now to take a look at Tinubu's rallying call for reconciliation. Mr. Shuaibu, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. First of all, what do you make of this call by Bola Tinubu for reconciliation and healing?
Well, it is the height of hypocrisy and deception and the manipulative tactics to hoodwink the people to maybe to buy into their stolen mandate. In the first place, there cannot be penance without contrition. They cannot talk of reconciliation without contrition. So you cannot say that you want reconciliation when there is no justice. Where was Bola Ahmed Tinubu when his team of aides, his team of jesters, including members of his campaign council, led by MC Olomo, were profiling people like it was done by the Nazist Germany in Adolf Hitler's time in 1930? Where was he? When they were profiling young Igbo people, who, if they tell them at polling units, if you are not voting for the APC, please go back to where you are coming from. People were being molested, people were being beaten. So he cannot wake up today to begin to talk about reconciliation without taking a look at those things, without saying, look, calling for even the arrest or surrendering some of his aides to the police and security agencies. To say, look, most of my aides, I am now president-elect or president-select or whichever name he wants to call himself or address himself. And to say, look, based on my position, I want to think like a nationalist. I want to talk like a nationalist as a former governor. And to say, look, some of my supporters, who profiled people in Lagos during the March 18 governorship election, I want to hand them over to the police for investigation and prosecution. Until he chooses to do that, he cannot talk about reconciliation. That is, it smacks of hypocrisy, it smacks of deception, grand delusion, and it's tendenciously wicked for him to even contemplate reconciliation in terms of, when there is injury.
Well, it seems we've lost contact with Phrank Shuaibu. We'll try to reconnect with him, and as soon as we get the connection back, we'll bring you that interview. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Newsday. We have with us Phrank Shuaibu, is a spokesperson, People's Democratic Party's Presidential Campaign Council, and is talking about the President-elect Bola Tinubu's rallying call for reconciliation. Mr. Shuaibu, you were giving us your thoughts on his call for reconciliation. Please continue.
Yes, my thoughts are very simple. I say it reminds me of the tactics that was adopted by Adolf Hitler in the 1930s. It's like we call it Nazism. And in Nazism, the Germans used the Jews as punching bags, and they decided to use a form of profiling. And that was the same way Tinubu's gangsters, including motorpark touts led by MC Olomo, were profiling young Igbo voters in Lagos. This is not the same Lagos we used to know. I remember Martin Sumbonu of Imo State. In the 1950s, he was a deputy mayor in Lagos. Can you do that now in the same Lagos? Since Tinubu became the leader of Lagos State 23 years ago, and he has been ruling that state, a lot has changed. People now begin to talk about Lagos belonging to a set of people and all of that. Of course, we know that we should have native speakers and the owners of communities and all of that. But Nigeria belongs to all of us. So the rules are clear, our constitution is clear and unambiguous. So Mr. Bola Ahmed Tinubu cannot contemplate to even discuss the issue of reconciliation without calling out for the prosecution of some of his agents aides and associates who were involved not just in voter suppression, who were involved in profiling, who were involved in reckless abuse of voters, including causing bodily harms to most people in Lagos during the March 18 election. What they did was simple. They decided to introduce violence, including traditional rulers. They will kill goats, kill chickens, spill blood at various polling units just to scare people away. Scare voters away from coming to these places. One of them even introduced the Oro Festival just to scare people away and all of that. Where women don't come out at night and all those kind of mundane, outdated tactics. These kind of things cannot work. What it signifies is that if he's coming out today or just yesterday, to a few days after the March 18 senseless display, in the voting units in Lagos, to now talk about reconciliation, then you should know that reconciliation comes with contrition. You cannot say you want penance without remorse. To show remorse, the only way Tinubu can show remorse, the only way anybody can take him seriously, is to call for reconciliation, is to bring MC Olomo and his other gang of jesters and say, look, I hand them over to the police. Police, please prosecute them. These people made inflammatory remarks. These people called for deportation of even the Igbo people and other tribal groups from Lagos. That is the only time people can take him seriously. But how do you take a man seriously when even his own spokesperson like Bayo Ononuga goes on his verified Twitter handle to say that, look, Igbos should leave Lagos for them. They should leave Lagos for. These are sets of people who claimed they worked against military dictatorship during the Bantustan and imperialistic military era. To now wake up today, to begin to talk in a modern democracy, to begin to talk about profiling like was done in Hitler's Germany in the 1930s, then it is shameful, it is ridiculous, it is preposterous, and it is tendenciously wicked. So we don't want that kind of hypocrisy. Mr. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, if he has nothing to say, he should keep quiet. He cannot talk about reconciliation without contrition. Reconciliation comes with remorse. So how do you want to reconcile people? After you have stolen their votes, after you have suppressed them, after you have beaten them, after you have scared them, after traditional rulers came, made videos, held meetings with non-natives, and in those meetings, they threatened the lives of people who do not vote for your preferred candidates. You said nothing. You kept quiet. Then after you have stolen their votes, you now come and say, oh, you want to reconcile? Come on, who does that? It's like a prostitute who will tell you that he's into prostitution simply because he wants to feed the poor. Who does that? Wow. You can't. Bola Ahmed Tinubu should stop kidding us. He should stop taking Nigerians for a fool.
Well, those are, it definitely is retrogressive, the kind of discussions that have been going back and forth within our polity over the last couple of weeks. But I know you said the only way to reconciliation is for the accountability to be taken, for justice to take place. But in lieu of that, some individuals are calling for some steps that the president-elect could take in order to console some of the nation. And specifically, Anambra State Governor Chukwuma Soludo, there's this discussion about the release of IPOB, head of IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, who's been in detention for a while. Do you see Bola Tinubu addressing any of these? And if he does address it, would you see this as a major, if he decides to take actions regarding Nnamdi Kanu, would you see this as a huge olive branch being extended to the people of Nigeria? Is this something you would even entertain?
No, funnily enough, I thought you were discussing reconciliation just at the level of the violence that was meted to the people and the profiling, reckless and shameless profiling of Igbo voters in Lagos. You cannot talk of reconciliation on the general election, considering, particularly as it relates to the presidential election. Whether you call him president-elect or president-select, that is an issue, is a conjecture and a matter of discussion for another day. That particular election is being contested in court, and we know through that we have grounds, very reasonable grounds, strong grounds, to set aside that particular election, particularly as it relates to non-compliance in the issue of in the conduct of the election by the electoral umpire, INEC. So it is not, when we're discussing reconciliation, please, I want you to streamline it and limit it completely to the senselessness that happened on March 18 in Lagos. not to the Nigerian polity, as Bola Ahmed Tinubu speaking as president-elect. No, that's not what I'm here to discuss. Because as far as I'm concerned, I don't recognize so. I don't believe he is one, because he's a product of a failed process. He's a product of a pauperized process. He's a product of a deliberately manipulated and skewed process. You understand? So he knows himself that he's an unpopular person. He knows that he couldn't have won popular votes in Nigeria. He knows that all the Bulabus, Malablu, and all of that couldn't have earned him election in Nigeria. So that issue it's not an issue for discussion. So he cannot even contemplate a negotiation or a reconciliation based on fraud. It can't work. So that is not. I was carried away because I've been pained. I've talked about it. We have spoken about it. We have spoken to it. That is the issue of profiling, which reminds some of us of the effect of narcissism in Adolf Hitler's Germany in the 1930s, and is that semblance that was brought to Lagos, where they cannot win. What they do is to whip up tribal sentiments, to spring up violence and all of that. But as it relates to the Nigerian polity, no, there cannot be reconciliation based on fraud.
Mr.
Even
Shuaibu,
among robbers, there is honor. If you want to steal, hold on, please. If you want to steal, you understand, you can even do so intelligently. In this circumstance, it was done in the most unintelligent manner. You cannot say you want to have a masquerade. While I was growing up, when you see masquerades in the village, the legs are covered. But this particular masquerade, which led to the emergence of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, both the hands, the legs, the mouth, the teeth, everything is outside. So even little children will play with this masquerade because they know that this masquerade is not a real masquerade that any child can fear. This masquerade does not have. And nobody will respect this kind of mandate. Nobody will obey this kind of. Nobody will enjoy this kind of leadership. Nobody will respect this kind of leadership, including the international community.
Shuaibu,
so it is not a matter for discussion. Yes.
Now, you have said everything you have said. We have heard you, and I'm sure your supporters, they would understand everything you're saying. Victims of electoral violence, definitely they would agree with all what you're saying. But I would like to point out that the fact that he's calling for healing and reconciliation, he's not saying that the opposition parties or the aggrieved parties should not go to court. In fact, their rhetoric has been go to court if you're aggrieved. So, and I know that the PDP has already filed a legal... Mr. Phrank Shuaibu, I'm giving you your time to speak. Please allow me to also speak. Now, I know that the PDP has filed a legal challenge to the outcome of the presidential election, and even in some cases for the governorship election. We've heard Gbadebo Rodsviver saying that he's going to challenge the outcome of the election. Now, what I want to ask is that in the meantime, don't you agree that we should actually douse the tension? We should douse all the inflammatory rhetoric while the matter is in court, because Nigeria cannot stand still. There's still the task of nation building ahead. I'm not making a case for any party, but I'm just saying that can we at least douse the tension while we fight for justice?
Can I? Yes, beautiful question, and I will respond to you by asking you a rhetorical question. You cannot say you want peace. You cannot say you want healing and reconciliation when you deliberately provoke crisis just to take advantage of the system because you have power at the center, and now turn around to say you want reconciliation and healing. How do you want to heal? Who do you want to heal in the circumstance? The people you sat down, asked your foot soldiers to go and beat up, harass, intimidate, disenfranchise. After doing that, you now turn around to say, oh, I'm sorry, this is a time for reconciliation. Nobody does that. Our children are watching us. Nigerians, the international community is watching. The world is watching us. Bola Ahmed Tinubu does not have the moral rectitude to discuss reconciliation, because a majority of those who perpetrated this violence, who perpetrated these acts of voter suppression, are not just his associates, they are his friends, they are his boys. He knows them, and he has never denied knowing them. They are members of his Presidential Campaign Council. If he wanted to even show little remorse All we requested is little remorse. At the time the acts were going on, he kept quiet. At the time the traditional rulers in Lagos, his Lagos, which he has been superintending over for 23 years. At the time traditional rulers, traditional institutions that are supposed to be revered institutions, by the time they were issuing threats to non-indigens, he kept mute. At the time his associates were threatening voters, he kept mute. Even in videos, recorded videos, he kept mute. He said nothing. Now that the acts have been done, people have been disenfranchised, the votes have been stolen, you turn around. He could have even made more sense of it by simply saying, look, the police, please go after XYZ. MC Oluomo and his associates who perpetrated violence, those who even issued threats, and we have records of them on national television. You have played that tape on this station. He never made any reference to them. We have the United States of American government asking for prosecution of those who participated in acts of voter suppression, intimidation, and attacks on defenseless citizens during the election. Your purported president-elect didn't say anything in that regard. All he's talking about is reconciliation. That's why we are saying it smacks of hypocrisy. Wretched hypocrisy. Lies and grand deception. Unacceptable. And in fact, it's an affront on our sensibilities as a people. He should keep quiet if he has nothing to say. What kind of reconciliation is he talking about? Without remorse. Without penance. You cannot talk of penance without contrition. You can't talk of reconciliation without remorse. It's simple. These are basic rules. Well, you understand? So it is not about, inflammatory remarks. That particular comment of calling for reconciliation on its own is inflammatory.
Phrank Shuaibu, very spirited contributions from you. Thank you so much for joining this conversation and speaking with us here on Newsday.